Welcome everybody. First, before we start, just check we're in the right place. Raise your hand if you're finding a lot of value already in today's session. Raise your hand. Great. And raise your hand again if you'd like to get even more insights and valuable tips and techniques that you can use to really make your ServiceNow implementation truly transform your business. Raise your hand again. Great. So hopefully today's session is going to be of use. Before we start as well, actually, who likes dogs? Raise your hand if you like dogs. Raise your hand, any dog lovers? Great. Okay, I've got something for you as well. Raise your hand again if you like cake. Anyone here like cake baking? Right, okay, a few of those as well. And lastly, who here likes 90s girl pop bands? Oh, I knew you would love them. Yeah, well, I think we've got something for everybody in this session then. So, I suppose really, maybe you are here today because you are looking to understand how you can make a ServiceNow investment successful and how you can make ServiceNow as a project really work and deliver the results you need. Maybe you're looking to try and change the relationship that you have with your business and actually use ServiceNow as a platform to enable a different way that you can work with your customers. Potentially, you're looking for ServiceNow actually as something to actually help you remove some of those commodity activities. And I think, as Daniel alluded to earlier, to maybe help you have a better use of your personal time rather than you trading your personal time for service success, which I know is certainly something that I am often having to do. Or perhaps you can imagine a future where you've got a new relationship with your business, or that you've successfully implemented a new service model where instead of IT and an ITSM platform merely being a tool for ticketing, it's actually something that can really enable real change and real cost savings within your business. Maybe you can imagine having it all. Lower cost, better performance, and a better relationship with your business. Well, to get from where you are today to where you want to be in the future, you may need to get some different techniques and approaches, and hopefully today I can take you through some of those. Now, I think it's more important than ever for you to focus on this, because it's important that you are able to make best use of your IT investments. It's also important for you to be able to make sure that you can select a tool and you've got a plan of how you can get from where you are today to the future in the shortest time possible. Now, I believe that it's never more important than right now to be able to make this sort of investment. You probably all know of the tsunami of change that's affecting all of us, from the birth of cloud and also from the growth of new technologies like ServiceNow. Last year alone, more patents were filed in the US Patent Office than had ever been filed in the year before it and all the years before it since the Patent Office opened in 1753. Last year also, more unique data was created than the year before it, and the last 5,000 years of human existence. The world is changing so dramatically fast, and our workplace is changing quickly as well. The demands of your IT systems and also the demands of your staff, the Gen Ys who are coming through your business, who now want to have commoditized great services that are just, as Daniel said, like Apple. That's the level of service that is now being expected of you to provide to your businesses. So, if I can take you back a little bit, to the summer of 2012, you would have found me in a white-walled room, maybe a quarter the size of this, watching a hypnotic sight of plane after plane landing on the world's single busiest runway airport at Gatwick. Now, I just convinced the new CIO at Gatwick to buy into a new strategy and a whole new way of providing services for the first time. And the worst thing happened. He said yes. Rolling forward a little bit, I should say basically that as a director of Velocity, we are an enterprise consultancy. And we help enterprise corporate clients to transform their businesses. And we do that with a number of different tools and techniques, but one of them is ServiceNow, and we use that as a key enabler. And the first time that we did so was at Gatwick. Gatwick is an amazing place to work. I don't know how many people here have ever flown out of Gatwick. Raise your hands if you've flown out of Gatwick. So most of you, if you've experienced Gatwick. And it's changed a lot in the last few years, but it's an incredible place to work. Not only does it have, obviously, an airport and two different retail shopping malls and 2 chapels and a fire service, but it's also a vastly complex system. So in terms of it, Gatwick has got 45 airlines who fly through it every day. It goes to 197 different destinations. It goes to 242,000 flights every year. And it's working at the moment 48 flights an hour, which if you think about it for a single runway is amazing. But they're actually trying to get that higher, upwards to 55 flights every hour. Now, 38 million passengers every year fly through Gatwick, and that's supported by about 2,500 Gatwick staff, but actually on top of that, there's about another 21,000 people who actually work at the airport as well. So this is a 24/7 non-stop business, and it is the world's busiest single runway airport. And they've got a big aspiration to become London's airport of choice. You've probably all seen, if you've been on the tubes, loads of adverts about the second runway at Gatwick. And this picture you see here is actually an illustration of that. But they've got very big plans. But going backwards to, if we go back, and they have a lot to look on, but if you go backwards to probably 2012, they were a very different place. Gatwick had a number of problems. IT was very inefficient. They had a number of failing outsource providers who were infighting and warring amongst themselves. And most of all, Gatwick's internal IT was hated by its business. When we first landed at Gatwick with Velocity, we used a Net Promoter Score to take a judge as to the level of satisfaction that, that the business had with its IT department. And the scale, I don't know if you know, Net Promoter Score is between plus 100, so Apple's about plus 69, I think, and minus 100. Gatwick's was minus 95. That means that everybody at Gatwick and their mums all hated Gatwick IT. So we had our work cut out. And we came up with a strategy that was accepted by Michael Ibbotson, the CIO, but at that time we already had 11 lot tender already in progress. And I now had only 5 months to recover that process, select some new strategic suppliers and an ITSM platform, get rid of the incumbents, do the whole transition and bring a new service online in only 5 months. Like I said, I'd been working at this point with a 10-year career at Fujitsu Services as a program manager, and this was the first time I thought I'd really bitten off more than I could chew. So I used ServiceNow as a fundamental way in which I came up with a disruptive approach to how we were going to do this. Instead of selecting a supplier and allowing my ITSM tool to be selected and chosen by them, I selected my ITSM tool in ServiceNow and then refocused my entire tender process and chose suppliers who were expert in ServiceNow. In fact, we've got Chris here, who was actually from Getronics, who was the supplier we selected in the end. It's a fundamentally different and more disruptive approach. But what I'm going to take you through is that it was very successful. And in fact, the results that we achieved were better than even I thought. Now, what I'm going to take you through, if that's okay, is the 5 techniques and insights that we use to make that very successful at Gatwick. Would that be of interest to everybody? Raise your hands. Yeah? Good. Right. So, the first need that I think you need to have is you need to be able to think big. Now, when I say think big, one of the problems that generally you have when you are selecting an ITSM tool is ITSM tools are selected by IT teams. They're selected by service desk teams or service managers. When actually, as I think we've spoken about, actually, really, ServiceNow has got, it's got the wrong name. It comes from an IT pedigree, but really, it's a tool which can enable you to improve the business performance of your entire business. If you imagine most IT departments represent, and IT costs represent between 2.5% and 5% of the overall cost of a business, there's another 95% of costs which isn't related to IT. So an ITSM tool that only influences and changes that 2.5% to 5% is going to make a very small difference to the overall cost of your business. If you can embed your ITSM tool to create an impact on the other 95% of costs, you've really created a completely different solution. So the key thing is for you to be able to plan your ITSM tool strategically and not just think about it from a point of view of its capability as an ITSM platform, but think about it as a true business enabler. And as I said, we did this at Gatwick whereby we wanted to make sure that we selected an ITSM tool because I knew that the selection of an ITSM tool and the one that I chose being ServiceNow was going to set the destiny and in fact the beating heart of Gatwick's IT services for the next 10 years. So my choice had to be made carefully, which is why I selected ServiceNow. I had worked previously, as I said, with Fujitsu Services, and I've seen the impact of other ITSM tools, ones that we probably all know the names of, bigger, more robust, potentially as they were thought of at the time, but increasingly inflexible and high-cost tools. And I've seen the impact of those crippling and locking down innovation and also driving up the cost of IT services. Who here in this room is old, like me? Who can remember typing pools with secretaries? When the directors of your company didn't write letters because they had a typing pool because it was a specialist skill and you go to a secretary in a typing pool. Well, other ITSM platforms are kind of a bit like that because you need to have that techie dude who sits in the corner, who's locked in a dark room, and when you want a new report out the tool, you kind of have to go and ask him to write a report. We wanted to change that with Gatwick. We wanted to do it whereby the CIO of Gatwick can actually sit down with his own dashboard, his own view of ServiceNow, and be able to get a view about what was going on in Gatwick IT at any one time. And that was a very different approach. So we wanted to democratize ITSM. We wanted to do it whereby people within the business could use the ITSM platform and actually develop on it without having to have costly, expensive skills, which is a very different model. So Gatwick at the time had been locked into this other way of working. We were on another old tool, but also we had, at the time when I picked up the service, 90 suppliers to one Gatwick permanent member of staff. Gatwick had lost complete control and understanding of its own business, its own relationship with its customers, and also with its DNA of its own systems. And this was a very costly mistake. It meant that when I exited from the incumbent supplier to the new supplier, it cost me £700,000 to do so. Because I was able to design it deftly and more intelligently on the same way around, when I'd exited temporarily Service Desk and Service Management from Getronics, who'd temporarily taken the service on for me, the cost was less than £35,000 because we'd used and baked ServiceNow as part of our core. We understood our systems. And that's why baking and thinking about ServiceNow strategically is of a key importance. I think the other next key thing that you need to be able to do is, and your next need though, is to be able to compare your apples and your pears. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, most people that I know, when they're building a business case for ServiceNow or for any ITSM platform, is they try and do a comparative between the ITSM platform they have today and the one they have in the future. And they do this as a kind of a battle of the bands, looking at all the features of the old tool compared with all the features of the new tool. Now, that's okay. If that works and you can get your business case through on kind of quite a small business case like that, then that will work. But I've seen on at least 3 occasions that failing. Because what that fails to pick up is all the other added benefits of automation that ServiceNow enables you to have. And really, for you to be able to plan your business case, you should try and look at coming up with a smart business case, which actually takes into account the improvements in performance. And again, not just the improvements of performance of your IT function, but also some of the improvements of performance you can actually have with the rest of your departments. We specifically started and designed ServiceNow at Gatwick that it wasn't going to be solely for IT. We knew from the very beginning that we wanted to expand it to be part of HR, facilities management, engineering, other service desks at Gatwick. And that meant that we were able to develop a much more compelling business case. In fact, the business case that we developed at Gatwick enabled us to look at trying to move, for the first time, about 80% of all service requests, tickets, and in fact any service action to the service desk in the first time in Gatwick's history. The next need, I think, is one of the biggest ones to try and crack, which is, I'm sure we've all had it, which is blank page-itis. Who's ever had the thing where you have that blank page, you've got an important document to write, and you keep putting it off, and you keep looking at other things? Who's ever had that? Who's ever had blank page? I get it the whole time. I was doing that at 1:30 at night last night, trying to do another slide pack for somebody else. And the problem is, when you get blank page-itis, is the fact that you often look at what you've got, and you take an existing document, and you just kind of rehash it. The difficulty with that with ServiceNow is what often happens is when you start to then build your blueprint of where you want to get to, is when you're starting with ServiceNow, ServiceNow is so configurable, where do you start? And sure, it's got ITIL templates and processes built within it, but the thing that most businesses often make the mistake of is trying to replicate what they have today and using that as a starting point for their future version of ServiceNow. Well, if you do that, it's a little bit like having a map that tells you where you've been, but not telling you where you're going. It's also, unfortunately, it's a bit like taking a Ferrari and then performance tuning it to run like a Sherman tank. Because you're trying to take a brand new tool and make it run in the same way and the same processes as the tool that you're trying to get rid of. It doesn't really make any sense. So the key thing that I believe you need to be able to do is to build a future state blueprint, not just from the ITSM platform point of view, but about how ServiceNow can impact your service processes, your teams, your ways of working, and even your relationship with your business. At Gatwick, we had a vision that we tried to create, which was, instead of us having service desks that were in Wales or in Scotland, we'd actually for the first time bring service management and service desks onto Gatwick's campus, for the first time in Gatwick's history ever. That meant we would be able to do some quite innovative things, like combining field support and the service desk, so that one day a guy who's taking your service desk call could the next day be out at your desk taking and helping you fix your PC. And this meant, by the cross-fertilization, we got great customer satisfaction because they got to see the faces of everybody in the IT team. The IT team got to understand the business. And Gatwick, there's only 1,200 people who really ever raise help desk calls. So it's very easy to, almost on a name-by-name basis, know your teams. That meant we could dramatically and very quickly raise the levels of customer satisfactions and customer engagement and loyalty within the business. More than that, though, by us bringing services on campus and us having our own ITSM platform for the first time, we're able to make far greater investment in automation and better understanding and management information about the data and the types of incidents we were having, to enable us to really start looking at proactive, long-term problem management rather than reactive, supplier-driven service management. I think once you've then cracked your vision, you know where you want to go, it should be straightforward. Well, it never is. It never is plain sailing. I think certainly for us at Gatwick, it came to December of 2012. So I've just managed to go through and transition out the new suppliers. I'm just mopping my brow. We've got new supplier Jetronics in place, but we realised at this time that we were planning to sit on Jetronics' own copy of ServiceNow. But when we looked at it, because they've designed it for multi-tenants, multi-clients, we couldn't have the destiny and the freedom with that tool that we needed. So I'm now coming up for December, just up to Christmas. I've just had the busiest 3 months of my life, and I've realised that now, in less than 3 months, I have to have my own ServiceNow implementation. And I haven't even spoken to ServiceNow about getting them in the door to try and buy the product yet. We then started working with Focus, who helped us come up with a plan, and the plan said 14 weeks. Well, the problem was with that is I had less than 10 to be able to get a fully working ITSM platform in place. And I had then new resources and new recruits who were going to be trained on that tool arriving in less than 12 weeks. So I needed to do something different. I needed a bit of TLC. I told you it was going to be good. So, now, does everyone remember this? One of my favourite videos, TLC, 1995. And what I find is pretty amazing, though, is that TLC, 1995, 6 years before the birth of the Agile Manifesto, actually predicted the end of waterfall project management. Isn't that amazing? You'd have thought that an American girl pop band wouldn't have had such brilliant viewpoints. But it's true. The main thing to do with ServiceNow is to ditch waterfall project management. And again, this comes back to, don't sit there and try and design your processes and have everything pre-configured within ServiceNow and go through a standard waterfall process of design, build, test, deliver. It takes too long. And actually, the great thing about ServiceNow is the speed and the ability for you to use agile development. Within the tool itself, it has Kanban boards. You can actually use full agile development and use the tool to actually run those processes. But we found that actually it was far better to use a beta culture. We engaged with a number of business unit reps we had, and we also engaged with our new growing service team so that on a weekly basis we would show them a new process and allow them to play with it. And this kind of beta test process of giving the product early, because actually the product is so robust that actually there's very, very few problems you're going to face. The problems you are facing are more around, do you like the way it's configured? We were successful in, by having not ditching the waterfall methodology, we were able to really up the pace, and we actually started to deliver the first working version within 6 weeks. 6 weeks, not 7 weeks. Yeah. But you can hear me. I think it's Paul. I think it's the amazing thing is that these sort of timescales to do something of this level of change is amazing. This is what ServiceNow gives you. 6, 7, 8 weeks. We actually delayed the launch of the customer portal because they'd never had one at Gatwick before now, and we wanted to make sure that we only had one time to make a first impression. So we spent a lot of time using CSS scripts and HTML code to basically make it look very, very sexy, and again, very much in line with Gatwick's design. It looks very Windows 8-esque. So the key insight, I think, to take away is for you guys really ditch the waterfall methodology, because you need to be able to do much faster implementations. 3 months in ServiceNow is a long time. You can really affect massive, massive change in those times. You're much better off developing the tool, develop your process in the tool, and then document afterwards. And that's certainly the process we used. So onto the, I know it's a dog, onto the next insight, which is that ServiceNow is not just for IT, it's for the whole business. I think one of the key things for my basis is the fact that you really need to start trying to think about how you can bake ServiceNow into your business application strategy and do that from day one. And this isn't just so that this isn't really benefiting, it doesn't really benefit the guys at ServiceNow, it doesn't help them with a license model, if I'm honest, because the way that the ServiceNow licensing is designed is all your business can use it. So you could be using this for HR, facilities, engineering, you could be using this for any form of process automation, any form of service automation. And if you can bake that in early, you can really start to ramp up the level of benefits you're going to get from ServiceNow. I've used ServiceNow, and the one that always comes up, I don't think we've mentioned it here, is kind of SharePoint. But what I have seen is ServiceNow typically is lean, it's low cost, it's very easy to implement. At Gatwick, back to the thing about the typing pool, Gatwick's entire ServiceNow implementation is maintained by one guy, just one. And he's brilliant. He's doing amazing automation, he's doing server provisioning, he's doing all kinds of things on his own. Whereas on SharePoint, I have seen SharePoint grow like some kind of amorphous blob within businesses. That SharePoint, people start talking about numbers of I think we looked at Gatwick at one point of it being £1.2 million to implement SharePoint for Gatwick with all of the business. You don't have that with ServiceNow. ServiceNow is very lean, and you can implement amazing changes which will impact the bottom lines of lots of your business departments. So I think the results, though, at Gatwick were truly, truly amazing. we were able to do two very important things. One, we used it to be able to recover a tender process in less than 5 months. Two, we were able to dramatically improve the levels of customer satisfaction within Gatwick. We went from minus 95 Net Promoter Score all the way to plus 35 within less than a year. Well, bearing in mind that's the same as Sony. That's an amazing move within a year. It's actually now even higher. I think it's around plus 60, plus 62. So it is a real way of enabling real change. And the way it does enable real change is by making everybody's lives easier, by improving automation, improving the self-service capabilities, and really enabling the whole business and their ability to do a lot of those commodity tasks a lot easier. But I suppose most importantly, though, we were able to reduce Gatwick's IT OPEX. We had a target of 10%. We actually blew that and got 12% reduction in Gatwick's IT OPEX, which is equivalent to 350,000 more passengers flying through Gatwick every year, which when you think about the number of 34 million, it's not a bad saving for a small little IT project. I wonder what ServiceNow could maybe do if you implemented it within your business, what impact it could have within your business. So, just to go over kind of what we've talked about, we've talked about the need to think big, to really try and bake and make sure that you're thinking about your selection of an ITSM tool strategically, not just for IT, but for your whole business. We've also talked about the need of having to have of planning your business case to be able to really not try and compare just apples for apples, but also compare the other benefits for ServiceNow around automation and self-sufficiency. We've also, I think, learnt to love the blank page, the fact that actually start with your with an end game blueprint in mind. Don't just try and clone what you've got today. We've also learnt that girl pop bands from the 1990s are extremely good at predicting project management changes in methodology. And I think, lastly, we've also said that actually ServiceNow is not just for IT. Bake it into your entire business. So, thank you, everybody. My name is Anthony Lamoureux. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. If there's any questions, we'll probably be outside. Thank you.